Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first ever remote Pi People. My name's Ben Lambert. I'm a product design director at Idean, and I thought just before we get started, I'd introduce some of the other people on the Hangout rather than jumping straight into slides. So we've got our three great speakers, Susan, Jen, and Mario. And then Jamie, who will be running a experimental Figma session, and then Jake, who is pressing some buttons behind the scenes for us. So we just wanted to say hello before we get started. So I'll just share my screen. So yeah, welcome. To those of you that haven't attended a Pi People before or don't know very much about Idean, I thought we'd just start with a little bit of information about us. So to those of you that know us, this is old news. To those of you that don't, hope it's useful. So we're about 70 people based in our London studio. We've been working in London as a group for about 10 years. We're part of a global studio network of about 18 studios, and we currently have 4 office dogs, though I've been told that number's rapidly increasing the longer that people have been working from home. So I'll be interested to see how many dogs that is when we get back. We work with a really broad range of clients, from insurance, standard life, through to utilities, British Gas 3, etc. So big range of projects in the studio. And yeah, welcome to Pi People. So those of you that haven't been to one before, this is our 18th. The usual tried and tested format of 2 to 3 great speakers, some tasty food and drink, and an awesome crowd. This is obviously a remote one. So unfortunately, the food and drink is on you this time, but I hope you've got comfortable with something tasty. So why do we do these events? Well, we're a sociable bunch and we're a bit curious as well. So we've always liked to get people in, guest speakers, etc., to sort of teach us something new and then also teach our network as well. So each time there's a topic, we pick something we really care about and then get a big crowd together to discuss it and chat about it. So that's you guys here with us as well. So feel free to chat away in the little YouTube bar as well. We'd love to see where you're watching. So we'll be tweeting and doing Instagram things as we go along, but basically to satisfy our own curiosity, if you fancy just showing us where we are in the world right now and doing a little post like this, we'd be eternally grateful. Even though we had all the time in the world to fake these two, Sophie and I have forgotten to put the hashtag in. So if you could do that, that would be great as well. So this Pi People is being pulled together by the product design team at Idean. So Idean has service designers, business designers, product managers, and product designers as well. And we design our product teams or our project teams using the best sort of skill sets from within those. So we're a team of about 30 designers within the product design team with a really broad range of skill sets and backgrounds. We're kind of hybrid by design. So, a product designer at Idean might spend a week leading some research and getting under the skin of some customer problems, whilst another might be working with a team of service designers to prototype new services and tools. It's a really varied set of skills, and I think that's what everybody really loves about sort of being in that role at Idean. So it was our turn to pick the topic today, and we did a little Figma workshop, and we started to think about 2 things that people started to vote on more. One was around pivots. So what does it mean in this sort of COVID world of work from home and lots of uncertainty for those businesses and designers that have had to change what they've been doing really quickly? And also, what does it mean to have new features for new norms? So what's going to change in the future, and how are we going to design around that, and how are we going to start to address some of those things as designers? So this talk, or the speakers that we've got today hopefully can start to ask some of those questions. So why fast change? Well, the thing that started to really interest us was actually businesses are challenged, and I think that's in the news, that's talked about a lot. You know, there's businesses are closing, they're having to change how they're working, they might have to be innovating or changing how they deliver things. Maybe their products are no longer relevant, or now their infrastructure is going to have to change. But really importantly, society is vulnerable too. And you know, as designers, we're really interested in how this starts to change users' needs and how they work. So, you know, from the economy prior to COVID, a project we worked on recently, we learned that 55% of all people pretty much in their 20s have no savings at all. There's been society changes. So only 9% of respondents to this survey want life to go back to how it was before. And there's also, whilst everybody's talking about digital saving the world and the future, there's some really important vulnerability aspects as well. So 73% of respondents to a big government survey that was done recently said that, you know, the people with access needs or disabilities face barriers in 25% of the internet effectively. So whilst on the one hand we're talking about digital changing how the world's going to work very rapidly, it's really important that we address some of those challenges as well. Otherwise we're going to end up in a world that is harder to use and more complicated for a good proportion of people. So we're a little bit biased, but we think that product design has actually never been more important, whether it's providing adaptability, so the tools and processes that, you know, we work with lets us change direction at pace, whether it's bringing in the user voice, about research and providing evidence to make fast decisions, or making the complex simple and accessible. So how do we actually make it better, better for everybody? So to sort of delve into that deeper, we've got 3 great speakers tonight that we'd sort of, you know, love to give a big virtual round of applause to sort of, yeah, start to discuss some of these topics. So Susan is joining us from Koru Kids. She's going to be talking about how to design when pivoting when a pandemic makes your product obsolete. Mario and Jen are both going to be doing some lightning talks about how they've faced some quick decisions and quick challenges and solve them for some of our clients and how we've been working together. So that roughly looks like this. We're going to start off with Susan and Jen. We'll have a little break. We will then run a little Figma experiment, and then Mario will wrap everything up. For each talk, feel free to stick a question in YouTube and we will be able to sort of pick that up and answer it for you. During the break, grab a beer, have a chat, and then we'll be back after that. So yeah, let's get started. I think one last note, the product design team are always about challenging ourselves and our clients and what's possible. So we have challenged ourselves by not going for a straightforward Zoom meeting, but instead trying to do some live video editing on YouTube Live with a comment section. So if there's any clunky bits, bear with us, we're challenging what's possible. So let's get started on fast change. We'll just take a couple of minutes and then switch over to Susan, who'll be doing her first talk.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Susan. I am a lead product designer at Koru Kids. We are a childcare startup based in London. There are about 40 of us-ish in the company, 3 product designers. And like very many other businesses, we've had to temporarily pivot and adapt really quickly to face this global pandemic. So I'm going to share a bit of what that's been like, both for our product and for our company and the way we work. Just a quick overview of what I'll cover in the next 15 minutes. Give you a quick intro to what Koru Kids does, or what we usually do during normal times. Then go through the headlines of the way in which we have adapted our product. And finally, elaborate on what made fast change possible for us. So Koru Kids was founded in 2016 by Rachel, who is our CEO. The story goes she had her first baby and was quite surprised to find out that the childcare system is quite suboptimal. So to fix this, she founded Koru Kids. And at Koru Kids, we are really passionate about society's infrastructure to include childcare as part of it. Obviously, fixing all of childcare in one go would be really, really hard. So the first problem we have focused on is after-school childcare. And this has become our core product and what we're known for if you're a parent in London. What this essentially means is we provide part-time nannies who pick up kids from school in London and take them home and look after them until parents come home from work. Under the hood, this means we do a number of things from an operations and a product point of view. We do all the things I've listed here. I'm not going to go through it all, but there's a bit of a machinery going on under it. So what do we do when there are no schools? As soon as schools close, effectively our core product didn't exist anymore, but our vision is still to provide the best childcare service to our families. And so we've had to make a number of tweaks and changes and pivots in our product super, super quickly in order to still work towards that vision. So it says 2 weeks, it felt like 2 decades because it's crazy intense. So I'll go through the main parts of how we adapted our product. Firstly, though, just a quick note on how we knew what decisions to make. At Koru Kids, we have a set of company values that we all believe in and that shape the way we think and how we make decisions. I haven't listed all 7, it would take too long, but I've pulled out 2 that I think best illustrate the way we have navigated this space and been a bit scope hammering, so to speak. So firstly, we put families first. We fundamentally exist to serve our families and by extension, our nannies, whatever they care about, so do we. So that has meant listening closely to what new families tell us they need when they sign up to our product. But more importantly, we've been listening closely to what our existing families tell us they need when they call our customer service team or when they speak to us in customer interviews, when we do usability testing, and so forth. Secondly, we move fast. I think of Koru Kids as a classic lean startup business, if you've read that book. So we make quick decisions and we execute quickly, and we make sure that our decisions are reversible as much as we can. So we focused on quick changes and simplicity over complexity. So onto the product changes themselves. In a world with no after-school childcare needs, we've introduced emergency childcare instead. That means short-term childcare for the duration of COVID-19 closures, however long that means. On the product side, that's meant a number of changes and tweaks to our sign-up flow for both families and nannies to better capture different types of intent and short versus long-term thinking. Koru Kids is normally a B2C only service, but we've recognized that lots of companies suddenly have their whole workforce working from home, and many of them are parents. So we've introduced a B2B service on a very lightweight, lean level, where we are partnering with companies to provide access to our nannies as well. We provide full-time nannies now. So again, during normal times, our after-school nannies, by their very definition, are part-time nannies. But we immediately saw a massive change in demand from families who suddenly asked for 8 hours a day of childcare, 5 days a week, because they're working from home with their kids and they need someone to look after their children. Equally on the supply side, we saw that nannies were suddenly way more available than they used to be for a number of reasons. Some of them have a tapestry of part-time jobs and they've lost their other part-time jobs, so they were suddenly much more available, or they're university students and universities have been closed. So there was this equivalent change on the demand and supply side. For our product, that meant we've been tweaking the way in which we collect and display availability data from nannies to families, and how it's shown on the matching platform, which is where families and nannies find each other. We went the simple route, so instead of collecting granular data and designing around granular structured data, we just replaced it with a free text box where nannies type in when they can work, and then we show that to families. This is a personal favorite of mine. We've been supporting virtual nannying, which effectively is nannies on Zoom or nannies on Google Hangouts. Nannies have been helping out with activities like arts and crafts, dancing, homework support, tutoring, that sort of thing, remotely, to obviously maintain social distancing. On the product side, that meant we made a small tweak to our mobile app, which is where nannies submit their shifts and parents approve them. So we introduced a way for nannies to specify whether the shift was in person or virtual, which enabled us to track that almost a quarter of shifts submitted are now virtual, and knowing that we can then give further operational support to in this world of virtual nanny. We've been doing a bunch of other things. This is not an exhaustive list, but I don't have time to list it all. But to name a few, we've been providing free childcare training to medical students who are volunteering by looking after the kids of NHS workers. We've been supporting live-in nannying, which is an arrangement where the nanny lives with the family, and that's meant the household is still maintaining social distancing. Our first aid training, which is an essential part for nanny training, usually happens in our office, but that's gone fully remote, and loads of other things. I'm not even sure I'm aware of all the things that have changed. So yeah, there's been lots of stuff. It was a few intense, crazy weeks. And you might wonder what made all of this possible and how did we manage to change this at this pace? I was pondering this question, and I thought I'd share some of the enablers within Koru Kids and the way we work that might help illustrate this. So firstly, we were really prepared. Super straightforward, but very much thanks to Rachel already in February. She could kind of sense that schools might close. She was encouraging us already in February to start working from home or prepare to have a period of working from home. And we just kept our ears to the ground to kind of anticipate the changes that were about to happen. This meant that by mid-March, we'd already been quite mentally prepared to react to COVID for weeks. And so it really didn't come as a surprise to us when we had to pivot so quickly. Secondly, Koru Kids has an existing culture of being remote first. It's a bit of an odd one because we're not that many full-time remote workers, but there are a few of us who are, and we want to make sure that we are inclusive to them. We also want to generally exercise our remote working muscle, because we don't want the fact that someone doesn't live in London to be a barrier to them working at Koru Kids. So this means that all our meetings are remote by default. As an example, our product demos, which happen fortnightly and is attended by the entire company, they're always on Zoom. Even if every single person who attends demo is in our physical office, we still do it on Zoom. So we all sit at our desks with our headphones on. Being remote first also means that we are already quite familiar with what remote collaboration tools work for us and which ones don't. So we're huge fans of Miro for workshopping and experience mapping collaboratively and that sort of thing. We love Metro Retro, which is maybe less familiar to some. Metro Retro is free. It was built to do remote retros, but we use them for anything. We use them for story pointing during sprint planning because you can hide and show your stickies. So yeah, being remote first from the get-go has meant that our transition into work from home life hasn't been as dramatic as it might have been for other types of setups. A third key enabler has been our culture of asynchronous communication. So I'll try and explain what I mean by that. I think in part because we are so remote first in our thinking, we're also asynchronous first in our thinking. So we don't rely so much on real-time meetings. A good example of this is Rachel's Hot Topics with an X. During normal times, Hot Topics is every Friday, Rachel records and uploads a 15-minute recording of what's on her mind and what she's working on and company priorities and that sort of thing. And she uploads that to Slack so we can listen whenever we want. These became super crucial during the middle of this most frantic period because things were changing so quickly at the government level in a way that directly affected the way we could function as a business effectively. And so Rachel's Hot Topics became daily instead of weekly, or almost daily instead of weekly, and really made sure that we were totally on top of all the rapid changes that were happening. So one obvious change was obviously when schools closed. Another huge one was when they announced a furlough scheme, because it meant that our nannies could be furloughed instead of, our internal name for it is broken up with the family when they're no longer working for the family. How do we know what direction to move in, especially when things are really messy? During normal times, we know because we work towards quarterly objectives and key results. They didn't make any sense anymore in this new world because the context in which we set them had completely flipped. So we needed something to replace them with, which became a COVID-19 response plan that the product managers and the leadership team quickly assembled and got together. And so that became our kind of, everyone rallied around it and we knew exactly what we needed to do and we had complete clarity around it. To support this response plan, we set up a single Figma file with the creative title of COVID-19. So for about 2 weeks, us product designers didn't work in anything but the COVID-19 Figma file. This was a really good way of centralizing all the product changes we made. Interestingly, marketing eventually started using the same Figma file to document the messaging and the comms changes they were making. So at the end of it, we had a single source of truth for all the different moving parts that we were making at a really rapid pace. And that became super helpful. So having this centralized collaborative tool was really important. We started introducing all company daily stand-ups. So every morning at 9, we meet on Zoom and all the squad leads give an update on what's happening in the squads. That really helps keep us all aligned. Granted, we are only 40 people, and I can imagine if you're like 400 people, that's a bit trickier. But it's also just nice to see everyone's faces now that we're fully remote. Finally, we've been really kind to ourselves and each other. We've recognized that these are really hard times for everyone, especially the parents in Koru Kids. Koru Kids parents tend to put in their Slack handle when they're doing childcare, so the rest of us know when they're totally unavailable to work. And we've just really doubled down on over-communication and emotional check-ins. And we've also made sure we still have fun in the middle of this. So we have non-work related Slack channels where we obviously share pictures of what we're eating, and we have a weekly pub quiz and all of that. So it's been really important that we're still bonding as colleagues in the middle of this. Thankfully, the dust of reacting to COVID has settled. We're not still reacting to the coronavirus, which is nice because we've now entered this cocooning phase where we are focusing on fixing the product and we're attacking chunky bits from a product backlog and that sort of thing. Koru Kids as a company is usually quite focused on growth. That's been really hard right now. And so almost as a silver lining, we're taking this cocooning phase as an opportunity to make our product awesome and ready for September when hopefully schools open again. Cool, so that's it from me. Thanks for listening. I hope that was interesting. I'll leave you with this tweet, which I found, and I found it really pertinent, and it kind of speaks to what Koru Kids as a company is trying to work towards. So yeah, I believe there is about a few minutes for questions.
Yeah, there are. Thanks, Susan. That was great. Some questions come through, which I will relay on your behalf. So we had a question from Sandeep, who asked this as you were talking through those new sort of propositions, the 3 or 4 new things that you've created in response to this. And I'm going to sneak in a question of my own as well that's part of the same question. So how did you sort of come up with those 3 concepts? And 3 or 4, so B2B and then the emergency nanny, and which of those has had the biggest impact on the business?
The B2B was very much through Rachel's contact. So Rachel has spent a huge chunk of her career talking at conferences and that sort of thing, and she's been a CEO at previous companies. So it was very much not something we proactively sought to do, but something that came to us organically through her network. So it's not been something we shouted about as much, the B2B aspect. So yeah, that just kind of came up organically. Emergency childcare was us reacting to the complete switch in new signups from families that happened overnight. So there are free text bits in the sign-up forms to register for Koru Kids, and in those, like almost overnight, all the families were suddenly, I just need someone to look after my child during this lockdown periods because schools have closed. And the final proposition, I suppose, is full-time nannies. Yeah, similarly, that went hand in hand with the different type of childcare need that was needed. So so the families were kind of, I desperately need someone to look after my kid while I'm working from home, and I need someone these hours. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, great. And yes, so I guess Sandeep's question, and I kind of hijacked, which has had the biggest impact? Like, how are you measuring what's working, etc.?
So yeah, the impact is like overall the impact on our business is smaller as we've gone into a lull. I think the emergency, like all our childcare setups, apart from the existing matches we've had, have switched to like emergency type of childcare. So that's had the biggest impact. But overall, the impact has been like not. Yeah, it's been what type of support can we possibly provide rather than yeah.
Great. And then, so with that emergency cover, Rochelle has asked questions, I guess, around how have you balanced sort of or managed the social distancing regulations and sort of health checks and screening with I need a nanny in half an hour? Like, where is there a middle ground between those things?
Yeah, so we're not a babysitting on demand type of company.
Okay.
Yeah, so our new matches have gone down very much, and our focus was very much on supporting our existing matches. So our matches, family and a nanny, it's internal terminology. So we've been supporting those in the ways we can. One with virtual nannying, the other with live-in nannying. With new matches, as much as we can, we've a lot of our work was around communicating government guidelines in every part of the journey, and our principle in all of this was to inform them of the government guidelines of social distancing and let them decide how to set up those arrangements themselves.
Great. Okay, that makes sense. So there's loads of really good questions. Let me just scroll up and down. So what pitfalls have you found? There's a few questions here from Louis and Steve and Rochelle and Elizabeth as well. What pitfalls have you found with asynchronous working? Like, what are the pros and the cons?
Yeah, the pros is you don't you're not constantly multitasking, so you can take your time to digest information, and also you can take your time to communicate information, so there's not this back and forth. One major pitfall, especially when it's so fast-paced like this, both because we're in the startup, but also at a government level and the global level, things change so fast. Asynchronous is quite difficult when, like, it's almost like FOMO if you're not on Slack where the conversations are happening. So that's the downside of it. Also, some people are better at in-person communication, and other people are better at written communication. And so if written communication is just not your forte, then it might just be easier to jump on a Zoom call and hash out.
Yeah, and how are you balancing that with? There's a question here from EMKS88, who, how are you balancing the single source of truth and documentation against the asynchronous, sort of in Slack, everybody talking at the same time? So I guess the question is around consistency. Like, how are you building consistency over time?
Yeah, that's a good question. Things do kind of fall through the cracks, and that's one of the big challenges of this, when things move so quickly. So it's hard to maintain. What's the latest decision. We do try to minimize the number. It sounds like a paradox, but the number of single sources of truth we have. So that we agree to update the one single thing, and if something isn't updated, then we try to communicate that as well. That makes sense.
Cool, great. Yeah, one last one, I think from Steve. What are the things that you think as schools start to reopen and there's sort of, everybody's called it the new normal, but there's some semblance of normality back? What things do you think you'll keep? Or are these all temporary measures?
That's a good question. We don't know. I think actually one thing that wasn't particularly introduced as part of this, but one thing we might keep is things around virtual nannying, or at least earlier in the journey when families are interviewing nannies. We were thinking it might be interesting to test doing interviews and trials over Zoom, because it'll be a lower barrier to meet each other, and we'll have fewer cancellations and that sort of thing. So optimizing Zoom better. But yeah, the rest is quite unknown, to be honest.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. It was really exciting and really great questions from everybody as well. So we'll just take a 60-second break, and then up next is going to be Jen Williams from Idean talking about how we've adapted some of our processes for the new ways that we're working. So we'll be back with you shortly.
everyone, I'm Jen Williams. I'm a product design director at Idean, and I'm going to be talking about how we've adapted to run ideation workshops remotely. To give some context to why we had to do this, when we were first asked to work from home, we were a few weeks into a project. We had planned in a 2-day ideation workshop with our client, and we were meant to have 20 stakeholders from different parts of the world flying in for that ideation session. So obviously we had to adapt really quickly to doing that remotely. So here's a few ways that we did that and enabled that workshop to be a success. So the first thing we did was we used Miro as our collaboration tool. So this replaced what would have been the walls in our workshop room. We picked this tool because it's really good for beginners and it's intuitive to use. And we had a lot of non-designers taking part in the workshops. And it also has built-in tools and templates and post-its and things like that that make it really easy to run a workshop. The next thing we did was we changed to shorter sessions. So we had planned 2 full days of workshops. Because we had people in different time zones, it wasn't possible to work through a full day together. And also it's really tiring being on a call for that that long. And also we acknowledge that people do get interrupted at home and may need longer breaks and things like that. So we built that into the agenda, and we broke up the sessions across the week. What we did find is that we spent a lot longer prepping. We probably spent twice as long as we would have done if it was in person. And there's a few reasons for that. The first being that we decided we wanted to create a lot of pre-reads and actually give people a lot more material up front, so they were able to prepare. But also, if anything happened, like their Wi-Fi went down or they got interrupted, they weren't missing out on anything. They had all the materials to hand. We also shared instruction for how to get started on Miro. And also things like workshop etiquette and conference call etiquette and things like that. So we wanted people to really be prepared when they turned up. For each session and each activity, we created boards in Miro to really guide people along. So because we were asking people to do tasks in these boards, we wanted it to be as clear as possible and kind of avoid confusion. And just related to that, actually thinking through all the little details for people is really key to helping make sure it's as seamless as possible and people don't get confused. And one of the ways we could do that is actually things like working out the agenda times for each time zone. It makes a really big difference. It's a bit more effort, but it makes a big difference to people. We would do this in person, but we actually did it much sooner than we would have done in person. So we broke into smaller groups. When we have 20 people on a conference call, it's really difficult to have any sort of meaningful conversation. Actually works best. We worked this out as we were going, that it's best if everybody's on mute and we use the chat for questions. So then we broke into smaller teams. We had separate calls for each team. And
hello, Jen.
So it's also a good idea to keep the main call open with the agenda on the screen. So if anybody isn't sure where they're meant to be and they need help, they can always dial back into that. So we adapted the format to work remotely. We ran a remote workshop, but I guess we'd always assumed that it was going to be second best to in person. And I think there's real opportunity to think, now that we have some time working remotely or everybody's remote, what are the opportunities that generates and how could you actually make things better than if they were in person? And so what we're starting to do now is think about ways of doing that, ways of rethinking workshops when you're doing them remotely. So there's just a few ideas here, but what if there was no need to meet all the participants in a workshop? We've put a lot of effort into getting a large group of strangers to be creative together. It's quite an artificial environment. So what if there was no need to do that anymore? And what if we did just break into smaller groups and worked across a week together, or there were more builds on what these different teams were doing and it was a completely different format. The other thing is when you have people in a room for a day, there's a lot of pressure on constantly doing highly collaborative tasks. And what it doesn't do is give you space to think and space to do individual tasks together and actually give deep thought to something. So what if we were actually doing more individual tasks and just coming together as a group for very specific decisions or very specific kind of collaboration on rather than it being all group tasks? And finally, what if we shifted the focus so that it was about building on and combining ideas? So we spend a lot of time generating lots of ideas in a group together when we're in person. But what if we could kind of spread this over a week and have people in their own time at these things and build ideas and combine them and try this in a different way and kind of spread it over that period of time and allow people to do things as they want to? Would you get better quality of output if you allow people to think things through in more detail and build and combine as opposed to just create lots of quantity? So I think, yes, it's good to adapt workshops to remote, and we know we can do that. But I think it's really nice now to think about what the actual benefits of working remotely and start to look at the opportunity that gives us to make things better. And actually, could this be a long-term thing that we always run workshops in this way? And there's a lot of benefits to doing that, like you save on flights for a starter, like we wouldn't have to fly in so many people to workshops like that. So it's something to think about and something we're working on all the time now and trying to see how we can improve our workshops. and I'll jump to Q&A.
Great, thanks, Jen. We've got a question, I guess, for me around, obviously, we as a team came up with these new ways of working and sort of implemented them. How did some of the people that were new, the workshop attendees that have maybe in a week gone from working in one way to another way, how did they sort of handle that change?
With 20 people, it was hard work taking them on that journey. And as much as we shared all this stuff in advance, not everybody read it. So one of the things we did was do an intro session before we had any collaborative involvement, where it was like really stepping people through the basics. And for the majority of people, that really helped. And using a tool like Miro, everybody got the hang of that really quickly. But we did have some technical issues, and I think that's something that I think if you start thinking about doing workshops in new ways, we shouldn't have to accept those things. We should just try and find a new way of doing it, I think. So yeah, I think it was the client considered it a success, and I think everybody. I was surprised how quickly everyone adapted to doing it remotely.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Daniela's sort of asked, how did you manage particular, stakeholders that have, for example, short attention spans? Because I imagine I've found this personally as well when doing remote sessions with people. It's so easy to read a text, look at a tab, and suddenly someone's attention's gone. Have you come up with any ways to manage that?
Yeah, we did find that it's almost remote makes everything exaggerated in a way, and so yeah, you get that in person, but it's just exaggerated. So I think what really helped was just repeating the context, repeating what you needed people to do, just repetition all the time, just reinforce what people are supposed to be doing. And it's also quite reassuring when you do that, even for the people that are following along more closely. And people did dip in and out of sessions. But because we'd shared everything up front as well, it was probably less disrupted that way. So we didn't have too many problems with that. I think what we did find was that when you open the floor to everybody and try and have a conversation with everybody, it's very easy for people to disrupt the session that way. And so that's why we started muting everybody and just relying on chat. Yeah,
great. Okay, I'm going to do two more questions quickly, and then we can go to a break. So Louise has asked, how did you feel about the quality of the outcomes and the ideas? Was there any noticeable difference, do you think, at the end of it?
That's a good question. It's interesting as well how different the teams were in their approach. So some teams are really direct and created lots and lots of ideas, and some teams did a lot more combining and kind of clustering as they want. And the approach was totally different depending on the group of people we had in each team. So that was really interesting. To be honest, I think the output was pretty much as good as you get in person. But what we would have liked to have done is spent more time on the refinement and the kind of builds, and we didn't necessarily get a chance to do as much as that as we might have done in person. And also, the prioritization exercises, because we'd spread basically the workshop over the week. Some of the things were cut short. So we would have liked to have done a bit more of that.
Yeah. Great. And one last question from Anton. So obviously I think you talked about there's less travel, but more prep. And if the outcomes are similar, is a remote workshop cheaper to a client than an in-person workshop? If we, if you think about how it would be priced.
I would imagine it was significantly cheaper if we weren't flying people. There were 20 people and they were all having to travel, some of them from the States. So yeah, I imagine it was significantly cheaper to do it remotely, and also saved on carbon.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and I guess travel, outside of travel costs, etc., if the output is the same and the value delivered the same, then actually the way of making it cheaper is actually to have the not traveling, etc.
Yeah, you save all that time, and it's not just the cost of traveling, it's the time people take to travel as well.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Jen. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, which I think takes us to 5:53. So we're going to be doing a bit of a Figma experiment. So one little bit of homework for you whilst you're grabbing something to eat or getting a drink is just log into Figma on your browser. So we'll be sharing a link and that will be required in we'll need your Figma ability to log into Figma in about 5 minutes' time. So I'll share the link for that in the chat, but otherwise, see you in 5 minutes.
one.
All right, welcome back. Now we've got Jamie, who's going to take us through a Figma experiment.
Hi guys, yeah, I'm Jamie, product designer at Idean, and yeah, we thought as a kind of like first try for this remote Pi people, we'd try and do like a kind of interactive side to it as well. And so essentially, yeah, I'm going to share my screen now. What we've got is this Figma file, so we're calling it like Figma Playground. Essentially, it's all around like how can we basically design fast for fast change. We know there's like so much change going on at the moment in businesses, in the way we work, like seeing that from that amazing talk from Susan and the really interesting talk from Jen as well. Like, but also there's like a lot of change in our lifestyles as well and just kind of our day to day. So we wanted to do like a quick exercise to essentially create 80 ideas to make living through lockdown a little bit easier. And really just to investigate like what can we, how much can we learn from each other in 10 minutes? So yeah, it's going to be time boxed, really quick, really loose, and hopefully pretty fun. And also just sort of seeing what happens when we put 8 people in one Figma file. So your task, and we'll send the link in a second, is essentially going to be to create a storyboard of what's changed in your life during lockdown. So some thoughts to kind of get you started could be, what sort of problems do you face day to day? Like, are there any new problems that lockdown's starting to cause for you? Here's Ben. Is there anything you're doing to overcome them? So kind of any little like life hacks that you've come across? Like what's changed for you since lockdown started? Is it changed for the better, or is it can change for the worse? And what are you looking forward to getting back to after this is all ended? Like, or are there some thoughts of things that you think will have changed once it's all ended? I saw some with anonymous there, so this is a little tip. If you follow the link that Ben posted in the YouTube comments, you'll be able to make like a Figma account, and then you'll be able to edit it as well. But if you prefer just to like sort of view the chaos that's about to ensue, then go for it. Just stay anonymous.
Yeah, it might be that you're signed in on the app, but not on the browser. But we have got 30 people in the file now, so let's see when this explodes. I think that's going to be.
Yeah, it's now. Essentially, we've got all these assets on the right hand side. So if you're sort of move to the right hand side of the file, we've got a load of little icons. We've got a kind of UI kit down here, and we've got loads of houses and some kind of stuff at the bottom as well. So if everyone could just like grab a template and please hold Alt and drag, so copy drag rather than like just dragging around, because we'll cause real chaos then. And basically, if you can just start making a storyboard, but yeah, just really remember to hold Alt or Option when you drag, and then build your storyboard that way. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll be in the YouTube comments to sort of pick up if anyone's having a lot of difficulty. But hopefully that makes sense, and just try and find a point or a place in the Figma file to sort of start making stuff. Also team up, like it'd be really cool to see people like working together to make the storyboard. So if you see someone doing something cool, like start to make it with them as well. But yeah, I'm starting to see everyone is getting in it now. This is looking awesome. So yeah, just go for it. As I said, storyboard your problems, storyboard your life hacks, and I'm going to set a timer.
Oh, we've hit the limit apparently. 50 people.
Oh,
apologies about that. So we did wonder if there was a limit. So thanks for finding it. I might drop out because I'd rather watch. So I'm going to go. Cool. So we've got 10 minutes, and I think there might be some tunes, and we'll see you in a bit.
beautiful chaos. I hope everyone's kind of getting on well with it, but I can see some pretty amazing stuff going down. We've got a nice little sofa, a load of sort of nice biscuits going down here. Oh, someone's having a crisis when I think when your dog has a better home than you. Oh, Moma, there she is, amazing. We have loads of stuff going on. It's all going down. Being avoiding pixels as much as possible. I know the feel, seriously. Yeah, it's beautiful. Feel free to kind of go absolutely nuts and even throw your own stuff in there. Oh, people are making good use of the stock images of people pointing at things as well. We're glad to see that. Very nice. Every day is the same. I do, yes. I also, that resonates very, very hard. It hits. So yeah, we're coming to 5 minutes on the timer. So if you can like throw in as much random stuff as you can possibly imagine into your storyboard template, just.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Jamie, for the people on the street? Well, out a little bit.
Out, sorry.
Just a little bit. Oh, that's all right.
Nice to see someone using the UI as well. That's productive. I unfortunately just made memes last time I did this, so. But
There's a man riding a bicycle backwards. That's good.
there is. That's what a second ago with a really big head.
Nice.
I think if one thing we're pushing Figma to its very limits here, which is pretty impressive. You can see some very cool stuff coming out.
Ah, I see. I had to reload the page to see all the images. Oh God, nobody's done anything. That's what they've been doing.
Yeah, I probably should probably reload.
Big shout out for the stacked standing desk. I've found an ironing board, works quite well.
Ooh.
Ironing board and an upside down washing up bowl.
That is creativity to the max. Oh yes, and emojis. I mean, that emoji pretty much describes 2020, not just like the current state we live in. So we've got 2 minutes on the clock. You can fill the storyboard up. Absolute big shouts. Yeah, there's no prize, unfortunately, for doing that, but you get digital respect.
Yeah, sharing Alcel's pains about not going to lunch places or working in coffee shops.
Regs.
I know. When will it come back? Right. Are we doing a countdown? What's the countdown?
We've got 1 minute on the clock.
Okay.
So yeah, tie up your storyboards. Obviously not going to look polished or clean or minimal.
Is there a prize? I think we forgot to talk about prizes, didn't we? Or is there one? Have I just invented a prize?
You've invented a prize.
Okay.
Got 30 seconds. Also rep the Figma timer plugin. Good stuff.
Mine's actually stuck on 3 minutes.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's working for you. That's fine.
So 10 seconds and we are coming to a close. Boom. Done. So I hope that was chaotic, fun, a bit of a break from kind of the usual things we do on Figma, like hardcore UI design, just throwing some stuff around and making a storyboard for a bit. But yeah, I guess like something to take away is, yeah, although a lot of us on this call might not have met, we still like learn a lot from each other. We still kind of create things together, even when we're like this far apart. So yeah, bit of a takeaway. I also hope you had fun. And if there's any problems that you identified, you can learn from them and like take them away and sort of think, actually, it's a good thing I'll take from this lockdown. So yeah.
Nice.
That's it for me.
Thanks, Jamie.
Always.
Great. That was really interesting. And I learned that there's a 50 limit on Figma files. That's really cool. It's good to see so many things so quickly mapped down in the template. So we'll take probably just another 60 seconds. We'll do a little speaker swap, and then we'll just have a lightning talk from Mario from Idean just to wrap up today's Pi People. So back in under 60 seconds.
That's great. Hello, everyone. My name is Mario, and I'm a lead product designer at Idean. So we thought it would be interesting to share with you our experience of running our first end-to-end remote project since the lockdown restrictions started. So today I'm just going to walk you through like 3 simple lessons from our team's experience, a mix of things that worked, that we tried, but also of things that didn't work so well and how we addressed those. I guess just before jumping in, I thought it'd be just valuable to acknowledge that, you know, we've been on a quite privileged position of being able to continue working from home during this period, which we know hasn't been true for everyone. And we also appreciate that everyone's experience working from home will be different. You know, people have different spaces available at home, different living situations, other responsibilities. So we know that some of the lessons or things we could recommend might apply differently to different people. And also just that there's like many thoughts out there on what remote working means right now. And this is just a few more thoughts to add to that. So I hope that you find something interesting in that for you. So I guess in first place, the project. So this was a 4-week discovery project to help our client understand how they could better serve a traditionally underserved audience. And because it was such a short project and it was with a client that we hadn't worked with before, it just meant that there was a bit more risk, and we had to like quickly adapt our ways of working. So I guess a few things we learned. I guess a question we posed ourselves at the beginning was, which tools should we use? And as you can imagine, for a remote working project, the tools we pick can make a big difference, because I guess they basically become the only connections you have to the work and to the other people on the project. And there's like so much choice out there, but I guess so we felt that not all tools are equally good for collaboration. So picking the right ones was quite important. So we made the decision to sort of choose less but better tools. We picked Notion to document our work. We picked Slack and Google Meet to communicate, and Figma to create designs and to run workshops. And this like more strict setup worked well for us because we had like single points of truth for our work. We didn't have like endless folder and file structures or versions of documents. We addressed the lack of a physical space, of walls and boards, things that we kind of take for granted when working in person, by using Figma for a lot of our activities. And all these tools kind of provided simple real-time collaboration. So they kind of worked well for us in that sense. And I'm sure like lots of other tools are like, it can be like equally powerful. Like we just saw earlier that using Miro, for example, can be a good alternative. But I think that it's important to acknowledge that there is still room for many tools to be a bit better at supporting and enabling a good remote working workflow. And so kind of making some of these decisions and some of these choices can make a big difference. Another lesson we kind of got from this project was that we had kind of to make a decision early on around how we were going to capture our work. I'm sure like we've all had these moments of, like, why did we decide that? Like where is the place where the answer for this decision lives? And we kind of felt that working remotely, it just means that, we can't leave things on the walls. We can just like walk people through little notes or scribbles as they like pass by you. Remotely, these moments just don't exist. So we felt that it was like really important to start the project with like a structured way to capture our work, our decisions, our learnings. So something we decided was to summarize our work more frequently. So this meant that everything got captured, from key decisions we made to like writing notes from interviews with users, from notes from meetings, all the outputs from the workshops, and basically making the effort to write up this information that would normally like sometimes live in our heads or on the walls of a project space. It just meant that we had a record of our work, our thinking, our decisions. We allowed people on the team to follow at their own pace, which was really important now that we were working in this way. And we also had the added benefit of allowing people outside the team to transparently follow our progress. Like we even had a senior stakeholder who felt that he was able to follow our work much more easily than in other projects where he was spending more time on, which does speak well sort of to the benefit of doing this. And as you saw before in the other lesson, we used Notion for this project, and it kind of really was like a perfect tool for it. Like it is, I guess, like becoming quite trendy these days to use Notion. But the truth is that it did allow us to organize our content easily, to search for anything, and to just basically just write without having to think about formatting or where to save things. If there's something you think is important to capture, you can just start writing, and then it becomes very easy for anyone on the team to find it. And I feel that doing this is a bit more than just writing things down, which is what maybe can feel like. I kind of feel that it's about compensating for the fact that we aren't speaking with our teams all day long. So doing these practices can make a big difference. And the final lesson was around communication. So basically, we knew that getting this right was going to be really important. We were doing the whole project remotely. We never had met the client in person. So we kind of decided, or kind of erred on a side of over communicating, as we felt that was like the right approach. We set up a Slack channel. We had daily stand-up calls in the morning, a daily washout in the afternoon, calls for workshops, ad hoc calls for conversations. Like you can see where this is going. Like it all became a bit sort of too cluttered. And whilst this felt like a good place to be at the beginning of the project, the truth is that it did turn a bit demanding a bit later as the weeks went by, and we kind of struggled to find time to finish tasks and to focus. So I guess a lesson we learn is that when you don't sit alongside your team for 8 hours a day, you don't have that real-time component. It can be a bit difficult to replace that with something and to find the right rhythm for communication. So we did get better at collaborating and sort of balancing collaboration and autonomy in this project. We were able to protect our time to work alone a bit better, to getting sort of together at the right moments, and trying to communicate a bit more asynchronously, which is something we've discussed on a bit earlier today. But the truth is that to do this is actually a bit hard, and I'm sure we still have more room to improve. And I guess this is perhaps the hardest change. I guess that's my feeling for many teams and clients that don't have significant remote working experience and now are in this situation. But I also feel that kind of getting this right is the one thing that can really help teams improve their productivity. So that's it. These are just kind of 3 lessons on things we learned, and I hope they kind of spurred kind of any ideas on things you'd like to try on your own projects. I guess kind of writing this talk, I realized that all the lessons are perhaps equally relevant to when we work in person to working remotely. I guess to some degree, like working remotely is forcing us to question, like, what do we need to work at our best? And I'm kind of hoping that, you know, what has made us work better apart will hopefully make us work better together in the future when we kind of settle into a new normal. So that's it. Thanks. And back to you, Ben, and for any questions.
Great. Thanks, Mario. That was really interesting. I guess I've got one thought, or something that started to form in my head around that is, how do you balance if there's people on the team with different rhythms? So perhaps one person likes to update documentation as they go, little and often, but maybe some other people like to do an hour at the end of the day. How does that sort of balance out in your experience?
That's a good question. I would say, I think it all has to start just through, I guess, 2 parts. One is having that conversation as a team, and the other one is sort of openness to different ways of working. I guess like when we kick off our projects, we always do like internal kickoffs, and some of the things you see here as lessons, you know, some of these tools we picked and sort of the way we planned the project were things we've decided before starting. So we had some of these conversations and try to kind of equip ourselves in the best way possible. But I guess it's kind of trying to find like something that we think kind of works for most people. Like, I guess on the point of capturing the work, it can be maybe a little bit sort of, or feel a bit intense that you have to like keep writing things all the time after you finish having so like a session or a meeting together. But I guess maybe that's something that we maybe also challenge ourselves a little bit, because building those good rhythms, those good practices of just doing a little bit of this every now and again can be good. But of course, you need to find a good balance with the other people on the team.
Yeah, totally. One question from Alistair. How do you can we as Idean pick tools at random, or do we have to ever balance or adhere to security, compliance, and regulation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think basically we don't have like a set list of tools we use for a project. I think we try to find the right tools for the right project, and of course for the right for the client. And of course we work with different clients with different sort of security requirements, and also I guess on project with like different levels of confidentiality. So I guess we always try to make sure that whatever tools we use, that they do sort of adhere to that, and that our clients sort of feel sort of comfortable with using them. I guess there's also a bit of like a push and pull where a client might feel more sort of comfortable using a more traditional tool. But if we think there's a case to be made for us to using perhaps like a new tool like Notion, I think we also have take on board that mission, and if it is sort of adequate for their requirements, it can be good to sometimes also challenge them, because it can lead to different results. Like in this project, using Notion specifically for documenting our work, it was really valuable. So sometimes that challenge can be helpful too.
Yeah, great. That's really good advice. Okay, well, that's it from all of us today. So, I personally learnt loads and really enjoyed listening to all the talk. So I hope you have too. Big thank you to everybody on the call today. So obviously Mary, Jen and Jamie, Susan, for their talks. Jake for doing some very swift button pressing in the background. So all those musical interludes and fades are all down to him. And then also to Sophie and Yuri and other people in the team as well, who behind the scenes have made everything happen. So thanks for coming. If you want to hear about more events that we host, then we will send out a follow-up email. Keep an eye on the Eventbrite, and then we can let you know when our next event is. So otherwise, yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll keep the stream live for a bit if anybody wants to ask any further questions to anybody from the Idean team. But otherwise, good night. Big wave from us, and see you soon.